morning everyone. Today I'm going to do an astrology reading. I don't know who it is. I have the chart here with no name on it. I've looked at it for about 10 minutes and I have got the person's name, male or female, under here. So I'm going to run through it very quickly just to see what we can pick up and who you think it might be as I go through it. So right from the very beginning we have the ascendant in Cancer. Cancer is normally quite a soft sign, it's quite nurturing, it's quite sort of intuitive, it's very sort of deliberate. It's a bit like Taurus in the way that they speak quite slowly, they're quite gentle and they're just there and they're unmovable in many ways. Quite fixed, although it's cardinal. And I always think of somebody with soft rounded features, and as I'm saying this I'm thinking Angelina Jolie and I'm thinking Cameron Diaz, so doesn't always apply. Maybe a rounder face, but that's about as far as I can get. Now the chart ruler obviously is the moon and it goes into the 9th house, so this person with regards to their emotions and the way they express themselves emotionally, there aren't going to be any boundaries. Their religion, it would not be a religion, it would basically aim more towards spirituality, where not everything's confined by a book, where you can actually do your own searching. Because the 9th house to me is somebody who likes to push boundaries and has high ideals and they like to get there on their own. So this person in an emotional sense will not like to be confined in any way. If it's a man, it may be somebody who's married somebody from a foreign culture or from some far off distant land. Right, let's go straight into their sun. Their sun is conjunct Jupiter and it is in the 11th house. So Sun conjunct Jupiter is going to add to that 9th house feel of being very expansive, very freedom loving, very sort of confident. But there's going to be a humanitarian bend with this person because it all falls into the 11th house. So they're going to think in larger groups. They're not going to think of themselves all the time. Jupiter doesn't anyway. It thinks in terms of groups. And the sun is in Gemini, so there's going to be some sort of communication, some form of quite a playful combination, Pisces and Gemini together. So there's going to be some sort of flair, I think, with communication with regards to reaching a larger group of people. It could be quite amusing, but I also think as well, opposite Neptune in the 5th house, it's going to be quite playful, creative. And once again, it's almost like illusion. It could be like glamour or film. 5th house Neptune, it can be quite glamorous and it's quite playful with it. There's maybe an air of people wanting more of it but not being able to quite touch it with the 5th house. There's something this person, the way they express themselves is almost a bit elusive. Right, this person is going to struggle with throughout their whole life this, because Jupiter and the Sun in 11th house in Gemini is opposite Neptune, and this basically comes together in a T square to the Moon, which is in the 9th house, as we've said. So this person, when transits cross this person's sun or aspect this person's sun, in some way they're going to find it difficult to incorporate these qualities in themselves. So their expansiveness and the way that they communicate with regards to being a bit sort of lost or buried or swimming through some form of ideals is going to be quite difficult for them to express in their emotional sense. So emotional sense. Do you know, it makes me think of somebody who travels abroad, and you get these programs when these people go into the Amazon and they take all like huge amounts of drugs and they go through different boundaries or different experiences and then they communicate them in some way to a large group of people. This isn't going to be that, but I'm just sort of saying it. Right, I'm going to keep moving. Mercury in the excuse me, I'm thinking and looking, 10th house is in Taurus. So once again, to do with this person's Cancer, they probably come across as quite smooth and quite controlled and probably have quite a nice voice. You know, something that resonates in people and people are drawn to it. A bit like David Attenborough. Okay. Mercury here is actually aspected only to Pluto in the third. So Pluto in the third to me makes me think that this person communicates in very sort of hard-hitting way, or that affects a lot of people, that it has a depth to it. So it's not just all silliness and glamour. There is some depth behind what they're doing, and that's what they pull out, and that is what they communicate. And this is quite heavily no, it's not quite heavily aspected. I'm telling porkies here. I'm going to leave that there. I'm just going to say that because I don't want to focus too much on that, because there's other points that I think stick out even more. For instance, they have Mars and Venus in the 10th house. The 10th house is how they are probably seen as their job, or by a larger group of people. And there is a real feeling of a large group of people here. This person possibly is seen as quite charismatic. Once again, with Taurus there's a sexual component here, and then this is opposite Uranus in the 4th house. So Uranus in the 4th house is in Scorpio. So once again, that adds to a sort of sexual feel. There's a real sort of humming sexual feel to this, but somebody who pulls it out of themselves and expands it to reach other people, to do with emotions or creativity in some way. There's some sort of glamour or creativity. And they may even struggle with that in everyday life, of basically getting a grasp on things, because there's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of feelings here. But there is some steadiness here, because the Mars and the Venus are in Taurus opposite Uranus. So to me that makes me think of arguments from home, from an early beginning. There's been some sort of flash temper. Mars opposite Uranus in the 4th house is like a flash temper that they may have learned from a parent, and it's just part of their persona that they give to the world on a wider sense. So it's like a charismatic, sexy feel, but with a bump to it, with a sort of a quick temper, but it's like sexual, and it's I don't know. Right, okay, so I'm going to sum this up and see, and I'm always really shocked whatever it is. Right, okay. This person to me, I'm just going to go over the bits that I find quite interesting as I've gone through it. The main thing I find interesting is that the way that they must express themselves or give across to others is quite in an emotional sort of sense. They are very expansive, and they don't have any boundaries, and those boundaries are basically shown here by the Jupiter conjunct the Moon in Gemini and Neptune in Sagittarius. So there's something to do with emotions and expression and a wider sense that reaches a larger group of people, or they push these boundaries. So it could be anything. It could be like I don't know. Oh my God, this is so interesting. Somebody who pushes themselves outside their boundaries. It's got a very Jupiter-Neptune feel about it, and this person struggles with their emotions. So it could be somebody who is quite a compulsive personality, who may like to drown themselves in drinking sometimes, or drugs, or there's a real sort of, there could very possibly like a sort of a, not a habit, what's it called when you can't stop it? Addictive quality here, because you've got a lot of water, you've got a lot of expansive planets, two expansive planets opposite each other, and they play a really important part with regards to the chart ruler. And then there's a real sort of 10th house, so that's the way they've seen on a larger stage, and it's got Mars conjunct with Venus, charismatic but very smooth opposite Uranus, so there's a flash temper. So this person has a lot to deal with in their life, and they have to basically pull themselves through it. So this is a chart that's quite hard for them to deal with, but those charts always make the better people. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned here is the Sun conjunct Jupiter in 11th house in Gemini is quite an outgoing and outgiving quality. It's somebody who likes to reach other people, who's probably very amusing, very good with words, very communicative, very sort of just likes to joke around. There's a playfulness about this, and there's an edge of glamour about it. But And this is actually in a very nice aspect to their North Node. So the way that they do that is probably what they need to keep doing to move forward in this life. I've totally ignored Saturn in this because I'm not really interested in this reading. So to sum it up very simply in a few words, it's somebody who struggles with life, but then is probably, and actually I don't mean that in a negative sense, I mean that they have got a really good chart for focusing themselves. And so they focus themselves with trying to pull together what they want to, what they see as expansiveness and boundaries, and they push that throughout their whole life. There's an edge of glamour to it, but there's an edge of probably some sort of addictive behaviour and probably some sort of flash temper going on here. Okay, if I was to sum this person up in a few tarot cards, I would probably say the first card I pulled out, I've gone dizzy, was the Magician. Now the Magician made me think of somebody who had a lot of inner qualities, a lot of inner workings, that was very able, because you have got a lot of sort of watery planets here, but they're in houses that are quite expansive, like the 9th house and the 11th house. So this is somebody who has a lot of qualities that they can give out to people, and it's probably something not many people can grasp in their selves, if you know what I mean. It's a real depth to these qualities, and there's a real sort of the use of larger planets here to give out to other people. The more expansive planets like Jupiter and Neptune. So this person has a lot of deep inner workings, and they probably, if they do it to the best of their ability, channel it out in some sort of intuitive or emotional way to other people. Right, what was the next one I had? Yeah, I put that with the High Priestess, which once again makes me think of somebody who has deep, rich inner workings and is able once again to push that out to people. So I put those two together. So I put expanding boundaries and crossing mental barriers and basically impressing their thoughts and their feelings on others. And then the last few I had, oh my God, I forgot my notes. I picked these at the beginning. Hold on a minute, I'll remember. To be honest, I'm going to have to be totally honest with you. I picked these when I thought that Pluto was in the 4th, so I'm going to actually chuck those away for the moment. I'm just going to sort of sum it up myself. So these two cards basically speak a lot about this chart. So it's somebody who has deep inner workings, who expands it out and channels it out to a larger group of people in some way. And I thought Pluto was in the 4th, so that's probably why I had with Mercury a feeling of using the family or growing up as a deep enrichment to how they basically enmesh their thoughts and feelings and then use them later on. To be honest, I'm going to leave it like that now. I'm just going to leave it with those two because I'll have to search through and get the other cards. Right, let's see who it is. What the bloody hell? Kanye West. I've forgotten what I've said now. I've totally forgot what I've said. To be honest, yesterday I did a reading, and I think I'm not going to tell you who it is just in case you haven't watched it, but I was talking about Neptune, and I said that people who I think are very Neptune qualities, of course it's very creative, isn't it? Are they Kim Kardashian and Kanye West, because they are basically very glamorous and people can't quite grasp them, but they use their glamour and they drown in their glamour in some way, especially Kanye West. So that is Neptune in the 5th house. God. So he's got quite an outgoing chart, he's very creative, and he struggles with that because he's very emotional as well, and that's where he gets his creativity from. But then there's this sort of like 10th house, charismatic, opposite this. I don't know if he's got a flash temper. I don't know whether he shoots his mouth off in interviews. Yeah, no, I do know he does. Yes, I think he does. Well, I don't even know what to say about that. That is fascinating. To me only maybe, but it is fascinating. Somebody, the Magician and the High Priestess, who has a deep, rich inner life and creativity and gives it out to a large group of people with some charisma and charismatic, and it's almost like smooth Smooth. Right, I'm going to leave that there. I don't know what to say about that. I'm always so interested in people after I find out who they are. And then I rummage around for like days finding everything out about Kanye West, who I don't know that much about anyway. Okay, I'm going to leave that there because I hope it's about 10 minutes. Third house Pluto, not that well aspected to Mercury, and Mercury's going to be a real expression with him with regards to his music. So Mercury, Pluto in the third house, there should be some sort of like he basically gets his inspiration to communicate from Pluto. So that is a real. I don't even know any of his songs whether they basically express his inner workings or not. Very creative. Right, oh my gosh, I'm going to run off and find out. Right, thank you very much for listening. I don't know if that made any sense, and I hope I wasn't mumbling too much, because it does take me a while to read it from a chart and then put it onto here and then work it out in my mind, but to me, so interesting. Thanks for watching. I'm running off now. Bye. Hi there everyone, I just had to come back. I've just basically went upstairs and talked and looked at probably 10 minutes on Kanye West, and I've just become slightly obsessed with him. After reading his chart, I'm just going to go over a few points which I found so interesting. The first one is his 9th house moon, which we talked about, and then his Jupiter, which is basically very 9th house, in his 11th house of reaching lots of other people, how interested he is in religion and how he gives out. He has Sunday services to lots of different people, and he goes into prisons and gives basically his view on God, or and his religion to other people in a large, expansive, giving way, which I find absolutely fascinating. And he said something like, because we were talking about his T-square as well to his moon, which is very emotional, and how he gets his inner callings from his emotions and his internal workings. He said, artists are like a lake to me, they reflect what's in front of us. So this is a man who really struggles with not struggles because he doesn't, because it comes out in such fantastic ways, but it's just a huge part of it, how he brings out everything that goes on inside him in a creative way with his 5th house with his 5th house Neptune here. Now, something else he just said, just very quickly, we talked about his Venus conjunct Mars here in his 10th house and how he's viewed, and I said something about him being viewed as very charismatic and opposite Neptune. So I also as well, I do think that is something. Uranus, and Uranus is in his 4th house, and he's very family orientated. He does talk a lot about how important his family are to him, but he did talk as well about, this is difficult when you've got an opposition, it's hard, and he did talk about addictions, and this is like sensuality, sexuality, and this is his 4th house, which is home, and we said it was in Scorpio, which is very sexual, and he said that from a very early age of finding his dad's porn mags, he was basically obsessed with pornography and sexuality. So to me, it would be really interesting to see what's going on in his chart around this point at that time. And he says everything that he's put into his music. Now I have a slight obsession with Kanye West. When he's talking, he has an air of vulnerability about him, but with this Jupiter, and there's a real sort of he's attracted to, he said he's a person who's somebody interesting is Jack Dawson. I don't know who he is, but because he's a visionary and he has a real sense of identifying with a God quality. This is so, so Jupiter, and this is so 9th house. To me, it is amazingly interesting. A real religious bend coming from that 9th house there. And power of communication. What did we say here about his North Node? Is in the 3rd house, communication with Pluto there, which is powerful. Okay, well, I'm going to stop there, but to be honest, I think this has just ignited a real sort of probably obsessional information finding out session with me, as in all these charts do. Right, I'm just going to leave you with that. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you again. Bye.